Philosophers and great minds of the human race have also engaged in wars. But how can you ever compare the wars of the commander of the faithful to the wars that we're fighting today in the name of American values and in the name of humanity, in the name of spreading democracy, and in the name of justice? So, moving on, sins lead to more sins. We explained the whole butterfly theory, the butterfly effect, how a snowball can lead to an avalanche, and how it's a crack in the dam, and therefore it's important that you start out by eliminating the roots of sins, the causes of sins. Forget about the symptoms. The symptoms, when you see them, it means that whatever you do is going to be too little too late. Whatever you want to do once the symptoms have surfaced is too little too late, really. You got to start out with the roots. If you think about it, I might lie, and the first lie always leads to a second lie. Because truth is something that, I guess, all people have this inherent ability to sort of tell truth from falsehood. When you lie about something, why is it that they use lie detectors and, brain scanning technology these days to tell whether the person is lying or telling the truth? Sometimes it's very easy to tell whether they're lying just simply by looking in their eyes. So when you lie, there's never going to be complete 100% certainty in the other person whom you've just lied to. So there's almost a follow-up question. If not immediately, then later on. They're going to start having doubts, and besides, this is falsehood. This event didn't really happen. So you're bound to have some, suspicions arising here and there. So they ask you a follow-up question, but because you lied the first time, you're going to have to lie again to justify the first lie. And the second leads to the third, and the third to the fourth. It happens all the time. All the time. And it's a theory that we can test. So Islam starts with the roots. It starts with the absolute foundations of sin and eliminates any chance of this sin exacerbating or growing or getting to stages where, as we said, it becomes too little too late to do anything about them. An example of that is a study that I read a couple of months ago about the effectiveness of abstention education. You all know that in the United States, some states they fund programs where children at school are taught about the whole idea of contraception and so on and so forth, because it's reached an epidemic stage where out of every 1,000 girls aged from 15 to 19, 100 of them get pregnant. So 10% of all teenage girls get pregnant at some stage. So obviously it's reached a very critical level. It's epidemic. They're trying to do something about it. So some states, they propose contraceptive education, while other states, the more perhaps liberal ones, say that, well, we should teach them about, the more conservative ones say that we need to teach them about abstention and how it's important to stay away from the whole experience rather than just use, safe methods and so on. And the study actually, it went through the results from one particular state, and in this case it was Texas. And Texas, as you all know, is considered a bit of a conservative state. And over there, they actually teach abstention education, and they say that we need to teach kids to, try to abstain from all forms of sexual activity rather than teach them about contraceptives. But the study showed that there was no difference whatsoever, even after taking into account things like geography and population and income and so forth. It turns out that there's no difference in the effectiveness of that technique in Texas than any other state which talks about, contraceptives. There's no difference whatsoever. Why? Well, I think the reason is, you got three reasons really. The first is that it really doesn't make much sense when you go up to a young man. Let me put it this way. You put a beautiful, delicious-looking cheesecake in front of a very hungry young man, and you say, listen, don't touch this because it could be bad for you. It could lead to, all sorts of complications. Well, obviously the man is going to say, if I can go wash my hands and come back and eat the cake, why are you telling me not to touch it? I can always wash my hands and be safe. So that's the first reason. It really doesn't make much sense. Why? Because their focus is to prevent STDs or teen pregnancies. It's not the whole promiscuous nature that they're trying to prevent. It's not that. It's not the actual acts of sexual intercourse. That's not what they're worried about. It's not the moral aspect that they're worried about. It's the fact that this could lead to STDs. It could lead to pregnancy. Well, if it could, contraceptive education is the best, right? I mean, you have the best of both worlds. Whereas look at the religion of Islam. The religion of Islam says, start from the very roots. Start with the whole idea, and we spoke about this several nights ago, about the idea of fantasizing. So not only are you asked not to touch, not to look at a person of the opposite gender, but you're asked not even to fantasize a person of the opposite gender. The Prophet says, do not even contemplate the idea of fornication. Don't even think about it. Islam goes so far as to say that if there is a seat where a woman was sitting just before you, she gets up and leaves, you want to sit on that seat in a bus or a train or what have you, and that seat happens to be warm from the warmth of the body of that woman. Islam says, do not sit on that seat. Why? I'm not fornicating, for God's sake. I'm just sitting here. Islam says, well, when you sit on a chair that has been heated up by the warmth of the body of another woman, you might, and we're not saying that it always happens, the idea is to prevent that from the very foundations of it. You might then think about that woman. And when you think about her, you might want to start to fantasize or whatever it is that perverts do out there. So the idea is to prevent the very roots. Another example is alcohol. I mean, one thing that I still can't understand about the Western mindset. There are lots of good things that the Western mindset can provide and benefit humanity at large. But one thing I just can't get myself to understand yet is the consumption of alcohol. And how, despite all the studies, despite all the experiences, despite all the real-life experiments that they've had in the dangers and the harms of alcohol, it's still not enough. It's not enough. A study was conducted on Russians and their drinking habits, and they actually say in Russia they're one of the, when it comes to consumption of alcohol, they've got one of the highest rates in the world, and I think they say that 30% of all Russians fit the description and the definition of binge drinking at least once a month, which is to drink a quarter of a gallon of vodka. Now, I saw these two charts. It's absolutely amazing. One chart displays the rates of alcohol consumption in Russia. The other displays the rates of homicides in Russia. If you put the two charts on top of each other, they match perfectly. So the more alcohol is consumed, the more homicides are taking place. And the amazing thing about it is that they say that in 1 in 3 cases, both the victim and the one who perpetrates the heinous crime of murder they're both under the influence of alcohol. I mean, if alcohol is what's causing you to die, why do you keep drinking? Islam says, abstain from the very idea of alcohol. Don't buy it, don't sell it, don't hold it, don't even sit on a meal where someone else is drinking from it. And sometimes, what really amazes me about this faith, because I've heard people say, well, does that mean that everyone who drinks alcohol is going to end up being a binge-drinking, alcoholic, incest-committing murderer? Not necessarily. But that's not what the religion is trying to do. Islam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't look at the individual or at the societal level all the time. It's not always macro versus micro. Islam looks at the larger macro scale, but also at the very small, minute, micro, individual scale as well. So if there is one 6-year-old girl who is going to be sexually abused because her uncle or her stepfather or whatever was under the influence of alcohol, Islam says, I'm going to prevent all consumption of alcohol so that this 6-year-old girl doesn't have to go through that traumatic experience.